the reason that the police don't abuse the system more than they do is because when they do stuff like that, guilty people go free, right? And so we protect the innocent from being wrapped up, abused, having their rights trampled on. By keeping the executive branch, we keep them honest, keep them obeying the rules. And that's the only way we have any rights at all.
Hello, and welcome to the Attorney Post, your guide to the inside scoop when it comes to all things legal. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hey, everybody. Hello, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with lawyers at the top of their game to help you navigate the ins and outs of various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm joined with Warren Price. He is half of the masthead at Murphy Price LLP. He is the Colorado Springs division. I think they also have some footholds in Maryland as well. We're going to talk to him about his firm and what he focuses on. He does a lot of criminal defense, federal crimes, military practice, etc. So Warren, hello, how are you doing?
Hi, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. My pleasure. My pleasure. Let's jump over and take a look at your site. As always, we will have a link to his website down below. It is CO Springs. That's Colorado Springs.lawyer. CO Springs.lawyer. Should be pretty easy to remember. Also, phone number, as always, is 719-247-3089. That will be in the description down below. Before we get started, we are going to jump over and read from our two sponsors on the top half. Our first sponsor today is Groove Funnels. Do you love spending $5,000 to build a new website? And do you enjoy paying monthly bills north of $99 a month to host on a platform that allows you to sell products to your potential clients and customers? Neither do I. And that's why I personally recommend Groove Pages, the all-new, all-in-one funnel sales website platform from internet marketing legend Mike Filsaime. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove to sign up for free and build a complete site at no cost. Really, at no cost. There's no cost to build a site. You can build, I believe, actually up to 3 fully functioning websites by visiting theattorneypost.com/groove. And you play around with the platform. It really is. It's an all-in-one webinar platform, sales platform, blog, website, affiliate program, almost anything you can think of. It really is a Swiss Army knife of a website system. And again, you can get started completely free by visiting theattorneypost.com/groove. Our second sponsor today is nationalerc.org. You may have noticed the world just went through a pandemic, and many businesses were forced to shut down, reduce their hours, and had supply chain interruptions, and ultimately suffered from reduced revenue in 2020 and 2021. What you may not know is that Congress recently passed the CARES Act, which allocated $400 billion in stimulus funds for small businesses that never needs to be paid back. This is not a loan like the PPP or Paycheck Protection Program. This is free money for your business that can be spent in whatever way you think makes the most sense for your business. Right now, nationalerc.org is helping small businesses get the maximum amount of money that they can, and you can calculate and see how much you can get back by visiting nationalerc.org. The average small business that they work with gets over $200,000 to reinvest back into their business, and again, that's money that never needs to be repaid. The calculator is free, and there's never any fee unless they secure funding for you. That is nationalerc.org. All righty. And back to cosprings.lawyer. Well, again, I've got Warren with me today. Warren is, according to his website, the junior partner, but he is half the masthead at Murphy Price, and they seem to be an interesting dynamic. We're going to dig into that a little bit today. He is the Colorado Springs side of everything that they do. He's been with that firm since, I think, 2004, if I recall. He's got a Bachelor of Arts in Government from Georgetown, a JD from Catholic University. I actually went there for my master's in philosophy. Very, very marketable skill, right? And he got his JD from the Columbus School of Law out there at CUA. He's a former Series 7 and Series 66 licensed financial advisor with familiarity with the U.S. security laws and regulations, a member of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, the American Bar Association, the Maryland State Bar Association, and the Anne Arundel County Bar Association as well. So my first question, Warren, as always, is, what did I miss?
What did you miss? I don't know. I don't know what
husband, father, all of those things.
Absolutely. Yep. I've got
to ski.
Got 2 young boys. I just got back from skiing actually a week ago. So, my wife is also an attorney. She's an immigration attorney, so she she does handle that side of the practice, both for our UC office and for our west of the Mississippi hub here in Colorado.
Gotcha. So is she also the price on the masthead?
Yeah, well, so we married long after the firm was in full swing, but she does handle our immigration practice virtually entirely for the firm.
Gotcha. That's very, very cool. I've talked to a number of people over the years that have gotten a chance to work with their spouse, and I think it's really neat when that works out and you both fall into law like that. So I guess let's start at the beginning. Why don't you go ahead and give me a pitch for your firm? Tell me, if we had 30 seconds or a minute in an elevator, and I was like, Warren, what do you do? Tell me who your ideal clients are. Who do you serve? I know Murphy Price is split between Maryland and Colorado Springs, and it seems like you're the CO Springs aspect, the Colorado half of the firm. But tell me who your ideal clients are. Tell me your ideal cases, what you serve, so on and so forth.
Well, we're primarily a criminal defense firm, and we tend to focus on both federal and military criminal defense. Dennis Murphy, who is the senior partner who runs the DC office for the firm, is a former Navy JAG Corps officer and has been doing military defense since the early 90s. And so we do a significant number of court-martial cases. I spent the first 10 years of my practice out there on the East Coast. And so a primary and perhaps the largest percentage of our practice was federal. We spent a lot of time in federal court. Our office was in close proximity to three large federal courts. The United States District Court in Maryland has two divisions, one in Greenbelt and one in Baltimore, and then the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, which of course is downtown in Washington, D.C. And so we did a significant number of federal cases. And so I have some experience there. Here in Colorado, we have one United States District Court, and it's located in Denver. And so I'm one of the guys down here in the Springs that still does federal work. And so there's a limited number of us. But I enjoy the practice. It can be law and paperwork intensive, but I feel like we do a really good job for our clients.
Awesome. So let me ask you this: what got you into law? Were you one of those guys that just always knew you wanted to be an attorney? Did you, everyone else was playing G.I. Joe and you were playing Perry Mason or whatever? I don't know if Perry Mason was a detective or a lawyer, but I feel like he was a lawyer. Anyway, that's what I thought. All of a sudden I blanked on that, but I was like, I think Perry Mason was a lawyer. So did you always know you wanted to be a lawyer, or did you just kind of stumble into that? I know you got your BA in government from Georgetown. Were you looking at like political science or politics, or how did law happen? And is that where you met your wife, since we know that she practices law as well?
Yeah. So I actually was, as you pointed out in your introduction there, I was actually a securities dealer fresh out of Georgetown. So I did financial instruments and sales. The thing about that industry, and I which is not to say I didn't enjoy it, but the thing about that industry is that for about 90% of your clients, the best advice you can give them is, under no circumstances hire anybody like me, and make sure to put your money into some S&P Vanguard index fund that charges a very low fee, and try to avoid people who are experts in this field. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot more money than you need to. And so I ended up wanting to transition out of that industry. I just didn't feel like I was helping that many people. It's the bottom line to it. And since I had experience building a business and marketing a business at that time, I went to work for a criminal defense firm, helping them with that side of the practice, building a business, marketing, that kind of thing. It didn't look the same back then, as you might imagine, Justin, but that was what I started doing. And actually at that time, Dennis, now my senior partner, was trying a capital murder case, general court-martial. And so I watched him try that case to an acquittal. And it had a little bit of everything: expert witnesses, valuable and admissible evidence, false confessions, just a little bit of all the elements of the law. And I was convinced from very early on that our client was innocent. And so we got to the end of that trial, and I felt, this is what I want to do. This this truly makes a difference, and so I asked if I could work for him as a law clerk, and I went to law school.
Nice. And when you're in law school, is that where you met the missus? Did you meet her after the fact, since you both are in law? Okay.
It is, yeah. So my wife was at Catholic University Law as well. And
now, what years were you out there? I'm curious, because I was out there in 09 to 012. I don't think that would have been before you, I guess, or after you, I guess.
So yep. So I was out. So I graduated Catholic University Law in 08. So
08. I came in literally the year that you left.
Yeah. So, and I was in the Washington D.C. area from about I want to say 95 to 2016.
Oh wow!
So I was there for a long time.
Yeah. So we would have, maybe been ships in the night or something. I lived in Northern Virginia. We are told it was a short little commute in, hour and a half on a good day. But
yeah, well, I actually lived in Northern Virginia too, but I lived in Roslyn, so I could metro.
We looked at that. It was really funny because we were at the time, and this has nothing to do with your firm, but we'll just talk for a second because it's funny. We were trying to figure out where to live. At the time, I was married with 3 kids. We have 5 now, and everywhere we could afford on a graduate student budget was there. We found this map called the DC murder map, and it was a Google map that was updated with all of the actual murders that happened, the color coded. You can click on it, who died, how many people, what were the circumstances, and every time we found somewhere we could afford in DC, we found the map, and there was a murder there. So we ended up living in Northern Virginia. I don't think I would ever wish living in DC on anybody. It's a nice place to visit. It's the nation's capital. It's got a lot of storied history and everything else. And I think CUA is a beautiful campus, as is Georgetown. But I wouldn't want to live there. Anyway,
I never lived in the city, except when I was living on campus at Georgetown.
Gotcha. Okay, so let me ask you this. Now, obviously, I actually read in the pre-roll there, one of our sponsors is National ERC, and obviously the pandemic was something we all just got through living through. Hopefully we're done with it, and we're not going to see anything like that again for the next 150, 200 years, because, man, that was annoying at the very least, and deadly as well in some situations, and we'll leave the politics of it aside. But I know that everybody was affected by the pandemic in some way, right? It affected a lot of attorneys and how they practice law, whether they did everything online, whether they zoomed into court, how they met their clients, everything else. So let me ask you, Warren, did the pandemic affect you? Did it affect your practice of law? Did it affect the way that you work with your clients? Did it affect your way that you work with the courts? How did the pandemic affect you? And is it something that you think you're going to go back to normal, or is this the new normal?
Sure. So I don't think anybody escaped the pandemic unscathed, either personally or professionally, and it certainly did change things. Some of those things are good. I mean, a lot of judges and particularly administrative courts have moved to a model where non-substantive, non-evidentiary hearings are done electronically, right? People can call in, they can Zoom in, they can WebEx in, or whatever the latest secure model is for it, right? And so in that respect, it's good, I think, because there's some efficiency there. And some of my clients, that means I spend less time, which means they pay less money. So that can be helpful in a lot of different ways. During the pandemic itself, though, when everything was like this, right? Everything was electronic. Stuff just didn't get done. The system came to a screeching halt. It's just very, very difficult in the law to negotiate outcomes, good outcomes anyway, unless you're doing it in person. And we just weren't.
Did that leave some people basically hung out to dry? Like they were stuck in prison, stuck in jail, couldn't get out but their court date got pushed back, and so they spent extra time in prison? Do you know? Is that something that was a common experience, or did the courts? I'm sure it was a region by region issue, but is that something that any of your clients dealt with or that you experienced?
So I was very lucky, and or good or both. And my clients, by and large, I was able to get them out of jails, prisons, detention centers during the pandemic, particularly if they weren't able to get speedy resolutions to things. But that wasn't true for everyone. Certainly, you're right, and I think a lot of people's right to bail, people's right to speedy resolution, were frankly just violated. And there probably be for a significant amount of time here debates among judges in appellate courts as to whether or not there was a justification for that, right? Whether public health and safety justified the violation of what we call fundamental rights. And I don't know that we're going to have all those answers for a while.
And some people may just be, I guess, legal casualties of the system. You can only do so much. So let me ask you this. I have a lot of people actually ask me this question. I talk with a lot of attorneys on a very regular basis, both in the podcast and in my business. And people are always fascinated by criminal defense attorneys. And one of the things people often say to me, and I used to have this experience, and I've heard enough criminal defense attorneys that they've kind of swayed me on it. I see where they're coming from, and I totally get it. But I'll ask you the question that people often ask me. It's like, don't you feel? I'll ask it in the personage of the people asking the question. Do you ever feel bad defending a guilty person? Right? Do you ever have a hard time sleeping at night? Or how do you practice what you do in a way that you feel is good, moral, just, ethical, and makes a difference, in a positive impact in the legal system? If that makes sense, without being, they're not trying to sound misleading or lead you into a way like, oh, you're a terrible person, right? But it's a question a lot of people have about criminal defense. So
it's a fair question. If there's one thing that my profession has taught me, it's that people are people. I can count the number of monsters I've met, let alone represented, on one hand. Now, does that mean I haven't represented people who've committed atrocities? No, of course I have. I mean, nobody in my business hasn't, right?
Right.
But by and large, all people are capable of great atrocities, and some commit them and some don't, right? And there are explanations for that. One of the things we say in my profession is today's victim is tomorrow's perpetrator, right? There's a cycle of victimhood followed by perpetrators, and these things are very real. And there are many people who get caught up in the system who have horrible lives. And so while there may not be excuses for their actions, there are reasons for them. So I could wax philosophical. You told me you're a bit of a philosopher yourself, right? I could wax philosophical and talk about how we're on the front lines of defending everybody's rights, and I think that's true. But the reality is, I don't do what I do on the front lines because of that, right? By and large, the people I meet are people, right? Suffering, hurting, wounded people. And, wounded people, like wounded animals, do irrational things. And they have a right to be heard, to have that explained, and to have a jury of their peers listen to them. And that's what guys like Dennis and I do, right? And so can I sleep at night? Absolutely. Sometimes I'll be honest with you, Justin, it's much, much easier to represent a guilty person than it is an innocent one. And the reality is that, sometimes you get to the end of a trial and you're representing someone is guilty, and the jury comes back and they say not guilty, and you pat yourself on the back and you say, wow, I am a really good lawyer, right? Or they come back and they say guilty, and you say, oh, justice was done. Which is easier than the burden you feel as a defense attorney when you have an innocent client. You can't get the prosecutor to see it, and so you're forced to engage in a trial situation. And you can't help but feel, look, if I don't bring my A game every minute of every hour of every day while I'm in this trial, an
innocent person is going to
injustice.
Yeah.
And so, frankly, it's easier to represent the guilty than the innocent. Does that answer your question?
I think so, for the most part. So some people would say, but do you feel guilty letting the guilty go free? Or how do you personally rationalize that? How does that all make sense within the confines of the justice system and ethics and morality. Again, I'm asking this in the person of the questions I often hear from people when they ask about criminal defense.
Well, the zoom out philosophical answer is the one I said, which is that the reason that the police don't abuse the system more than they do is because when they do stuff like that, guilty people go free, right? And so we protect the innocent from being wrapped up, abused, having their rights trampled on, by keeping the executive branch, right? That is to say, the police, district attorneys, prosecutors, et cetera. We keep them honest, keep them obeying the rules. And that's the only way we have any rights at all, right? And you know, when prosecutors and police do their job well, right? My job becomes more about negotiating an outcome rather than it becomes about, as you put it, letting a guilty person go free. Right? And sometimes, you know, part of that system is about what can we do to make a victim whole, while at the same time, you know, coming up with a resolution that allows for redemption, right? Mm-hmm. Allows for a perpetrator to become a productive member of society, because, you know, that's the goal, right? What can we do to make both people's lives better from this point forward?
That makes a lot of sense. And again, I think that's kind of how I understood it when I've talked to other criminal defense attorneys. Between that and what you said there a minute ago, and I'll probably make it the snippet that leads into this whole conversation, in fact, is that you know, the reason that the police don't abuse the system is because if they did, people like you would catch them and the guilty would go free far more than they do. And so you guys really are a check and a balance. But you're also, I like the idea that you're there to help negotiate outcomes, right? And outcomes that are in everybody's best interest, because, you know, I'm a believer personally that there's definitely some judicial reform and prison reform that needs to happen. I think that we do have a lot of people in prison who probably don't need to be there for whatnot. But I also think, you know, we do need to be working on reforming people. And again, I'm not here to get super political on this particular call or this particular.
No, I think it's fairly universal now.
Yeah,
people agree that prison is a terrible system of rehabilitating.
Yeah,
it's very effective at keeping people out of society for some short period of time. But it is not a very effective means of rehabilitating. And so sometimes that's what it's about too, right? It's figuring out, and we talked a little bit earlier about this victim perpetrator cycle that exists, right? Mm-hmm. It's pinpointing at what point did something go wrong, and can we rectify that, right? Can we find an appropriate treatment that's going to make this person be able to move past this? Because, you know, all of society doesn't get better when we throw people in prison. But it does find appropriate treatments for those that are wounded, for those that are suffering, for those that have mental health issues. And so if we can do that and get these people past it, it unburdens the system somewhat. It's less expensive for taxpayers, and it's much more effective at preventing recidivism and protecting the public. So.
Awesome. No, that makes perfect sense. And again, I'm fully on board with that. So that was a great answer. I think you knocked that one out of the park. So let's make you humble for a minute then. One of my favorite questions to ask is to tell me about some of your best successes, but also your failures. I'm a firm believer that no failure is really a failure as long as you learn from it. Otherwise, if you learn from it, it's really a slow burn win, right? So can you tell us, Warren, about a time in your practice of law, maybe early on, maybe last week, whatever it happened to be, where you suffered what you would consider to be an actual failure, and you know, diagnose as best you can or whatnot. But how did you learn from that? What did you learn from that, and how do you carry that forward to make sure you're best representing your clients moving forward and doing your best to prevent those issues from happening?
Sure. You know, there's a joke in my profession that there's a rule of evidence called the best evidence rule. And there's a joke in my profession that the best evidence is the evidence you think of on the way back from the courthouse. And sometimes that's true. You know, and the mistakes you make in trial haunt you as a criminal defense attorney. You know, and I can think early on, I think of a trial that I had where I thought I was extraordinarily clever. You mentioned Perry Mason earlier, and you know, TV cross examinations. You know, I think of A Few Good Men or Perry Mason or Matlock or or more modern, like Law and Order cross-examinations, right? Which are, quick and pithy and clever, and somebody tricks somebody, and, you get a confession. And so I remember early on thinking that I was cross-examining a witness and thinking I was extraordinarily clever and thinking that I was scoring all these points. And as I came to the end of the trial, I realized that nobody realized the points I'd scored. The judge didn't seem to know, the jury didn't seem to know. I'm not even sure the prosecutor picked up on it, And so from that point on, I've come to realize that trial is not about being clever. Right? You have to be careful and deliberate, and you have to you really have to reduce a trial to a very small number of important ideas or facts. I had a mentor in this profession once that said that pretty much every trial comes down to one fact, right? That sways the jury one way or another. And great trial lawyers over the course of their profession start to figure out what that fact's going to be, right? I'm sure I don't get it. I'm sure I don't get that right every time. And maybe it's not one fact, maybe it's 3 or maybe it's 5. But we're not in the courtroom to be clever. And it's important to remember, what we are there for, right? It's to get at the truth, right? And so, cleverness has a very limited role in trial practice. Not at all like TV would have you believe.
Gotcha. No, it makes a lot of sense. And that's one of the things I tell my kids, is the best thing you can learn is how to communicate. And it sounds like, when you're writing a paper, what's that maxim? You tell them what you're going to tell them, and then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. And it sounds like even in court, like that skill, underlining what you're saying and why you're saying it, drawing all the inferences, and then like redrawing them to make sure everyone made that connection. It's probably utterly crucial. I think communication is probably one of the best skills you can have in life anyway, being able to persuade people and help get the ideas out of your head and into other people's heads, which I think is valuable. So well, let's put the shoe on the other foot, though. I'm sure you've had some brilliant successes, those cases where you pat yourself on the back, you leave the courtroom, and the heavens are parting and the sun rays are coming down and the angel choirs are singing, like, man, I just knocked that one out of the park. Can you tell our listeners about 1 or 2 of your cases that you would say are the feathers in your proverbial cap, so to speak, the cases where maybe you thought that everything was stacked against you, and all of a sudden you pulled out a win that you were just like, wow, that was amazing, or where you just knew going into it was an open shut case and you just didn't even give anyone a chance to argue against you, in a sense?
Sure. I won't go into detail, because obviously most of these things are and the more successful I've been at it, the less public information they should be.
That's fair.
The fact of the matter is that we talked a little bit about this earlier. The moments that are most, I don't know if they're pat on the back moments, and I don't think that's really what they are, but the moments I'm most proud of are those moments where I have represented someone who I truly believe is innocent, who are accused of something that society has deemed a heinous crime, and we've gotten to an acquittal. We've had general court-martial cases where we've had clients who are accused of sexual assault, as Article 120 of the UCMJ is a pretty overcharged article. There's a lot of pressure on the military right now to make sure they wrap up and severely punish sexual assault allegations, and that they believe accusers, regardless of how unbelievable their claims might be. And so, a lot of these cases go to trial. And the reality is, these folks face significant consequences, maybe sex offender registration for the rest of their life, maybe significant terms of imprisonment. A federal conviction for Article 120 is basically a federal conviction for rape, as far as people look at it, and maybe they're on their way. Maybe of course it's the end of their career, right? And if they've got a significant number of years in the military, right, that can be a factor. And so when these types of serious allegations come down and we're able to win them, convince members that this person is innocent, those are the moments that I'm most proud of in this profession, because I think they have the biggest impact. The day-to-day stuff, you win some, you lose some, and you can pat yourself on the back for them. But it's when you get an acquittal in a trial where you truly believe someone's innocent that really it's hard to explain the emotional roller coaster that leads there, and it's hard to explain the feeling of relief when you get the acquittal. So,
gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense, and really a job well done at the end of the day. Knowing that you made a difference in someone's life, they get to keep their military pension or whatnot, and we all make stupid mistakes sometimes too. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting because I do think you mentioned, and again, we don't need to go into the political aspect of this. You're welcome to. I try to keep politics actually out of the show more or less. I occasionally will tip my cards a little bit, but it is interesting because we have entered in the last 3 to 5 years this concept of believe all accusers, and certainly you need to hear out any legitimate accuser to be sure, but that doesn't mean just because there's an accusation that it's always founded in reality. And so I think there really is an important stopgap there, having someone who can look at all the facts and help people determine, is this a case of mistaken intentions? Is this a case of, actual sexual assault? There's lots of different issues going on there, and a lot of people never factor all that in. So,
yeah, these types of pendulum swings are dangerous. And I'm not trying to be political. I'm not strongly politically affiliated in any way. There are certain things I believe in because of my day-to-day life and what I do, right? So prison reform is one of them, right? I'm a strong advocate for the 4th through 8th Amendments, but again, that's my day-to-day life, right? So,
yeah.
The pendulum swing's dangerous, right? It is horrible when people who are legitimate victims are not believed. I mean, and there was a period of time where that was going on, right? And so that's a travesty, and it's an injustice. And on the other side of it, when you believe everyone, no matter how ludicrous the claim is, there are victims of that too, right? Mm-hmm. And so and so we hope, right, that the system doesn't break down, right? That these sort of public fads, media fads, whatever you want to call them, don't affect how our justice system operates at the end of the day, or at least doesn't affect it much.
Yeah, you are an important cog in that machine. That's awesome. Okay, so I'm sure people come to you, Warren, with sorry, I have a call coming in. I think I accidentally answered it by touching my earbud. Sorry, whoever called. I think it was probably a spam number anyway, but I was trying to silence my phone, and I think I accidentally answered it. I'm sure people come to you with misconceptions about what you can do and what you can't do. Hey, you're the attorney. Everything's going to turn out sunshine and roses no matter what, because I'm paying you, this amount of money or whatever it happens to be. What would you say are one of or a couple of the biggest misconceptions people bring into your office, and how would you disabuse people of those misconceptions?
No, it's a good question. So, television makes people, we talked a little bit about this before. Television gives people a perspective on how the law operates, how trials operate. It can be confusing. There are lots of people that come in my office and give me piles of information they think will be helpful in their case. And I have to tell them, this is not going to be admissible. Okay? And they can't understand that, right? So our rules of evidence are generalized, right? And they're supposed to be an effective means of keeping out that which is irrelevant, that which is prejudicial, that which could make someone make a decision on something other than the evidence of a specific act. But because they're generalized rules, there are times when valuable information is excluded. And it's hard to explain to people why that might be, right? And so there's some of that. There's some people that expect you to be Perry Mason and, score major points and get witnesses to admit extraordinary things on the stand. That's pretty unlikely. Every once in a while, something like that happens and you feel like, you're on television or something, but it's not that often. Okay. And so that's certainly part of it. And people don't understand how much, and I'm not being political here, but how much politics can affect how the criminal justice system operates. Right? The DAs in many places, Colorado being one of them, are elected officials. And so they care deeply about what the press says about how many convictions they achieve. And they care deeply that it doesn't say that they dismissed domestic violence or sexual assault or drug cases or whatever that the flavor of the hour is.
Yeah.
But sometimes they make decisions that are not based solely on justice.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be hard for people to understand, particularly people who grew up with faith in the way our justice system operates.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into the political aspect of that, but I'm, familiar with certain cases, some more prominent than others, where that seems to, in fact, have been the case. And again, I guess it's really important to have people like you. You're the stopgap of justice. That's your superhero now, right? I am the stopgap of justice. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I'm kind of thinking about that concept and trying to figure out if I want to go down that rabbit hole or just let it rest. It's probably wise to let it rest so we don't go too political. But it's fascinating anyway. Well, I'll tell you what, Warren, I really appreciated the conversation that we've had so far, and I know your time is very, very valuable, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. Here in a minute, I'll probably ask you our final questions, and my listeners, they already know what those questions are. But the first question is if we were able to go back in time and meet a young Warren, and you can give yourself some advice fresh out of law school, what advice would you give yourself and why? And of course, by extension, a new law student fresh out, green behind the ears and green behind the gills. And, what advice would you give to them by extension? And then the other one is, of course, my magic pen, which can strike laws from the books, edit laws that are on the books, or add new laws to the book. And if I give you my magic pen and you can change one law, it could be a big one with national sweeping ramifications, federal law, whatever, or it can be a little tiny stupid local law that makes you fill out forms in triplicate 15 times a week and it just is a thorn in your side. What law would you change and why? So while you're percolating on those for a minute, we're going to jump back over and take another look at your website. This is Murphy Price LLP, sorry. COSprings.lawyer is the link down below in the description. If you guys are watching this on YouTube or listening on any of the podcasts, we always do appreciate a like, subscribe, and share, by the way, if you're out there. So you guys can take a look at his website, COSprings.lawyer, federal crimes, state crimes, military practice, tourist defense, and I guess his wife does some immigration stuff as well. So take a look at that. And then our final sponsor for today is my own company, Rank with News. If there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or your business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Forbes, Bloomberg, and other major national publications, and then you could see those articles ranking locally sometimes in under 8 hours for major competitive keywords that people were looking for in your area, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page 1 in under 2 weeks safely, organically, and often permanently. This is essentially guaranteed SEO search engine optimization, or SEO on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking oftentimes indefinitely. Visit rankwithnews.com or rankwith.news to learn more and to book a time to speak with one of our specialists about featuring your firm or your business in major national 8-figure traffic sites that can launch you to page one in a matter of hours and help you dominate your local marketplace, get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and ultimately win more customers or more clients. That is rankwith.news or rankwithnews.com. All right. So the moment of truth, Warren. Our magic pen allows us to travel back in time, and we see a young Warren fresh out of the Columbus School of Law at CUA, and you're able to give yourself some advice other than, again, buy a lot of Bitcoin, hold it till 60K or whatever, right? What advice would you give yourself, and of course, by extension, any other, fresh law student, fresh out of school, who's looking at, maybe joining a firm or starting their own company or whatever it happens to be?
Well, if it's me, I think I would tell myself not to get discouraged. It's easy to this is the type of business where you get emotionally invested in the people that you represent, and you're not going to get a victory every time. And when you don't, it's very easy as a young lawyer to feel deeply discouraged. And so I would remind myself, it was a line in Law and Order where Jack McCoy gets on the elevator and somebody asks him about this. And he says, if you're like that in this profession, you'll end up talking to yourself in elevators. Right. And it's true. You have to learn to, you do your best, put yourself on the line, you fight hard, you get better at what you do, but sometimes you win, and sometimes you don't. And you have to learn to live with it.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I'm wondering now if your average criminal defense attorney, if they get started with a series of wins, are they more likely to stick with it indefinitely? Or if they have a series of losses, are they more likely to look at some other aspect of the law or whatever it happens to be? I don't know if there's any industry data on that, but I would be interested to see what win ratio and loss ratio does to people's persistence in a particular legal field. That might be a fascinating thing for someone out there to do a study on. If you're paying attention and you like doing stats, somebody figure that out for me. So, and leave it in the comments so I can come back and find it later. That's a good answer though. So, other question. Magic pen time. I give you my pen here, Warren. You can do anything you want. Big law, little law, national, federal, whatever it happens to be. What law would you change and why?
No more elected prosecutors or judges.
You think that would solve the politicization of the judicial system?
I don't know if it solves the problem, but it certainly helps, right?
It removes one area where there is a problem happening.
Yeah. And prosecutors their only consideration should be justice. That's their oath. By making them elected politicians, we've essentially made them violate their oath. And so I have often said that I think a system that has an attorney general appoint prosecutors would be a better one in terms of the administration of justice.
Interesting. That's a suggestion nobody's ever made before, and I don't know how I feel about that personally. I think it's a really interesting concept. I don't know what all the ramifications that would even be. Right? I feel like the idea of electing your DAs and whatnot makes sense on paper, right? And that way you elect the person you think is the best to do the job. If they're not doing a job, you can kick them out. Like, that feels like a safeguard, but then clearly sometimes it's not. So clearly sometimes people are getting in there and doing the exact opposite, or they're just politicking the entire time.
And part of the problem with a system like that is that the only people who know what makes a good prosecutor and a good judge are other prosecutors, lawyers, and judges. And that's a very small percentage of the population.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so the people who are voting prosecutors and or judges into office really don't have any idea whether these people will make good prosecutors or judges. And
Right.
so, right. And that's an area of education that we're not going to get to. And
Right.
so we either have to accept that the people electing these people don't actually know whether they're going to do a good job, or we have to find a different system.
Well, that is an interesting choice. And again, that's going to give me stuff to ponder on as I'm doing my work later. I'm like,
I know it
wonder what that
sounds
would look like.
anti-democratic, especially from a defense attorney, but that's what it is.
Well, not everything is about democracy. We're not a democracy. Everyone says we're a democracy, dangerous to our democracy or whatever, right? We're a republic, and republics are ruled by law and order. And we're a representative republic. We're a democratic republic even, right? But at the end of the day, not everything is popular vote. What is that famous adage? Democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for dinner, right? And the republic steps in and says, we're going to make sure this is actually working. The thing of the people, the res publica, right? I'm a libertarian at heart. As I've gotten older, I've realized some libertarian positions are a little more untenable than others, but at the end of the day, I'm a government that governs best is the one that governs least sort of a guy and whatnot. But I do recognize that sometimes the people are not always the best deciders of a particular issue. So yeah, it's interesting. Well, that was a great suggestion. It's probably one of the best, honestly, I've had. Sometimes people have, predictable answers or whatnot. I wasn't expecting that one. Kind of came out of left field, but I like it. And nicely done. I like it. Well, Warren, thank you again very much for taking the time to meet with us today. I do always like to give my guests the final words. Are there any last words of wisdom, any parting thoughts that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
No. Well, how about this? Enjoy spring. Looks like we're finally getting some sunshine and blue skies and good weather. So stop the podcast and go out and enjoy it.
Or listen to the podcast while you're watering the lawn.
While you're talking.
That's the benefit of the podcast, right? You can listen anywhere. Stop watching the video. Get away from the screen, but you can keep listening. That's great advice. And I'm looking at my tree right out my window, starting to bud and everything else. So excellent advice. I was watering my lawn earlier today, really enjoying the weather. So 100% behind that entirely. Well, this has been the Attorney Post. I've been talking with Attorney Warren Price of the semi-eponymous Murphy Price LLP. He is the Colorado half of that law firm. They specialize in federal, state, military, criminal defense, etc. As always, though we do talk about lots of legal issues on this podcast does not constitute itself legal advice. And if you do find yourself in a situation where you need a competent attorney in that field, always seek out the advice of an attorney in that area. Obviously, if you're in the Colorado Springs or Colorado area, particularly if you find yourself in need of a criminal defense attorney, court-martial issues, military legal issues, whatever it happens to be. I think he also does licensing. If you're a doctor, a nurse, or even an attorney and you have a license complaint, I believe his firm can help you with all those things. I would highly recommend working with Warren. He seems like he's got a great head on his shoulders. And as always, linked down below in the description, cosprings.lawyer. That's cosprings.lawyer. So you guys have been watching or listening to The Attorney Post. As always, we do appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. If you're on yonder YouTubes, if you're on any of the podcast repositories, a rating or a review or a thumbs up or a share, whatever it happens to be, always helps us out. If you found this helpful, let us know in the comments below as well. And until next time, this is Justin West reminding you, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Thanks for listening, guys, and bye-bye.